is about the most important things to Singapore, for Singapore stories, or indeed any theatre or form or anything, it's the writer.
I think, having lived in UK and having lived in Singapore, what I see is that because Singapore is this point of intersection of culture coming from US, from UK, Japan, Korea, China, you know, that all these influences come together and they mishmash and create something.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, you know, if you open somebody's bag, you will find something from each of those cultures. And as well, you may find a packet of chicken rice or whatever. You know, and that's the thing. But I think well, this is my own opinion, and obviously I'm coming from where I'm coming from, but it's not just one thing. So for example, you know, a Singapore story isn't just about rich, very rich people, as in Asians, or just about HDB. It can be the present, it can be the past. I mean, like you were saying about one particular club didn't allow women, and we don't know that. I mean, I didn't know that.
No.
And I don't know if many people know that, this young women of this generation. So I think for me, I would say that's a great story, and that should be there, that isn't there. So it's mining all these little stories and creating, you know, putting them together, this quilt of what is of Singapore, you know,
yeah, because
it's not one thing. But at the same time, I think it has to resonate beyond. I mean, like saying Shopping with also after you performed it, it was also performed in England, London, sorry, about 3 times. And even though it was a Singapore play, it still resonated with these young English girls and boys. It was performed once at Rose Bruford College. Yeah, and they liked it. Apparently, this is the feedback from the director, because although they can't relate to Tumis, they can't relate to the market even, Seletar Market, for example. They can relate to this idea of the loss of the little shops that, you know, because in the story it's the supermarket, which it had, and the wet market is replaced with a supermarket cold storage, which is actually what's happened. And they can bring their own story, their own experiences to that. So even though you are being specific in the details, as long as there's a universality in the emotion or the experience, the loss, for example, is a universal emotion, you know, it can resonate with internationally. That's the thing, is, you know, there's this image of what that it's often imposed from the outside. And what I'm saying is we should push back against those ideas imposed from the outside, push back against that by creating more stories which give a more complete, fuller, richer picture of what Singapore is, rather than, oh, they're anti-government, or they're Singapore party girls, or they're, you know, putting us all in neat boxes. And I think that's what I push against. I think that's what I think we should push against.
I think the best notion of this kind of crucible is Singlish, the language, because from there you can actually put that, it changes in each person's mouth, no matter how they
Okay, because you said to me that it's very, very difficult to write Singlish. Why? And now you're telling me why, because it changes. Why?
It's because when different people speak Singlish differently. And
is it the pronunciation? Because it's a vernacular. A vernacular is a part of us. Okay, go on.
And it's also the syntax and the grammar. And when you put it on the page, sometimes it's really hard to tell. Like the word, the word is it? Do you put a comma before you put the word is it, or do you leave it? You say this one cannot, is it?
Do you close it with a full stop
or a comma or a question mark?
Yeah.
It changes the way the language is spoken, and it's one of the more interesting experiments that has come out of playwriting.
And traditionally, Singlish has always been kind of seen as a short form, as an efficient way of, because you drop a lot of articles. So it's gained this kind of very. It's gained a bit of a reputation as an inelegant language. But the truth is...
No, it's very efficient, isn't it?
It is efficient, but it's also a very beautiful language.
But it's a vernacular, so that it should have its own wealth. I mean,
So to find a way to kind of push through an emotional truth, true Singlish or to
Yeah.
find the poetry in Singlish.
But
That is
maybe
the
you
challenge.
don't need to put in all those punctuation marks and let the actor read it the way.
I know, but that's the thing, because sometimes if you just write it with just full stops, it changes the way you say it, the way people read it. Because not
So you put in the punctuation marks not to dictate, but to help.
to help,
Yeah.
to facilitate it, because Singlish can be said in so many ways.
Or to give a hint that you're aiming for a certain kind of rhythm.
We have a lot of programs which encourage you to be playwrights, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I started like that, and if you're lucky, you get on a longer, which I did with Theatre Works, for a year program, and those are great. They're really good. But I think what we need to do is have a structure whereby there's some follow-up, you know. So you have a production and then collate them. I think this Checkpoint Theatre, I have to say, I remember they're doing that. I think, but I mean, I think this is how we can keep the stories, otherwise they are lost to the wind, like you're saying, you know, they're written, they're forgotten. And I mean, as a writer, I mean, there are a lot of plays that I have that are, you know, at the bottom of the drawer. Of course, that's not where you want them to be. You want them to be out, you want them to be produced in different languages, in different places if possible. Yeah, so I don't think, if we won't make an effort to collate them in some way and keep them, well, they're going to get lost.
This is the point I'm making larger, right? The larger point I'm making, which is that a lot of playwrights come to the table, it's completely daunting. The actors completely do not fit what they've heard in their minds. The director does something completely different and they get completely jaded. They think, oh, theatre is not for me. And then they stop there. I mean, there have been a lot of playwrights older than me, and I think some from our generation who were never kind of given the right advice of how to behave as a playwright in the rehearsal room at the table.
Okay. I'm with you now.
And I think that it's, yes, developmental programs, Centre 42, who are doing a great job, that's vital. Various theatre companies are having incubator programs, collectives like this are raising up, trying to get new playwrights. Those are needed, but what's needed also is basically this practical advice.
Yeah.
What to do as a playwright in the room. When do you hold back? When do you give a specific thing, say, no, this has to be like
And are you being trained on that?
you have to experience it. You have to sit in a room with different directors and different actors and your plays, and you just need to listen to each other and say it's negotiation, which is what.
Really, yes. I think that's a perfect word to use. Negotiation.
But it's a positive one. Negotiation always has negative connotation, but this is the positive
Yeah.
thing, because people come to your script with they can genuinely contribute to it, but you need to decide what to keep, what to take away.
And I
because
do
it's
find, for me, as a non-published playwright, a bit of a challenge, because then nobody comes to me for scripts. Yeah. I think Checkpoint has a wonderful process of publishing so many plays by playwrights and just making sure that that book is just themselves, and it really helps them in their career.
I mean, I think if you're a playwright and you're freelance, as in you're not attached to a theatre company, then it is hard if you want to get your works produced. So, for example, I've written a play, where can I get it produced? And what's happening now, because we don't have maybe a meeting point, maybe what we need is a meeting point of producers, directors, and sort of like some marketplace, if you like, of exchange of resources.
Of course.
And maybe
The marketplace is actually a very, very beautiful metaphor.
yeah, so I mean, if we had something, I don't know if there is, maybe there's an informal network, but what's happening is that playwrights are now, because they want to get their work produced, having to put on the producer's hat. So, for example, we have Jean Tay, as I mentioned earlier, set up Saga Seed Theatre, Jack Chai, Playground Entertainment, and for myself and Verena Tay and Audrey Wong, we did Magdalena back in 2008. Having to put our producer hats on and doing that. But I think it's harder for playwrights or writers, because we are the kind that, if you go to a party, the writers will be one in jeans and, against the wall, hiding completely. So for us to go out there and pull ourselves out there and sort of try and sell ourselves, oh my goodness, it's frightening. But the thing is that because of this lack of, I feel, not that I'm aware of, anyway, ecosystem or marketplace where we can exchange resources, that everybody is having to put on different hats, and that's good it's not a bad thing, but at the same time there can be a conflict. If you're a producer playwright, on the one hand, as a playwright, you want the best for your play, but as a producer, you've got to keep an eye on that budget. So it's a difficult balance.
This is an interesting point because you're right that in both in America and in London and other places of the world, that is exactly the developmental process that plays undergo. It takes years.
Yeah.
They start off Broadway, and then it winds. It takes like a 3, 4, 5 year process to get to Broadway, and millions of changes are made. Our local plays don't have the depth, don't have the structure of plays from the West. It's because the West, that's the development process.
That's why we need
and
that.
you cannot just say that our plays are inferior if you're not willing to commit that time and the resources to developing our local plays. And you've alluded to the great point, which is that to develop a play takes an immense amount of resources. It takes time. Actors sometimes do it pro bono. They just come.
I do it. I've always been pro bono.
Exactly, right. And these are jobbing actors who have to feed families, and they come and they contribute their time and their opinion. And it's a lot of effort before a play gets a full professional staging.
Yeah.
Until very recently, very few companies were willing to do that for original Singapore writing.
Why?
Because, like I said, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of time and
Risk.
it's a huge risk.
And you told me that when you did Fraggle, you had several reads.
Yes, we had 3 or 4 table reads. I mean, it was developmental. So I remember the first read, I came in literally with 5 or 6 pages, and it was just one scene. And that was the seed of a play, and I got feedback, and the play grew, and as the play grew, so did the number of readers that came for each table read. And so there were about 3 or 4 table reads, and then there was a public presentation of a nearly finished draft end of last year at the Singapore Writers Festival, and then we got feedback for that. I looked at the feedback, and then I finished the draft. We're grumbling about why isn't there more rigor in our development?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, and you put your finger on it. You said why we did not have more rigor. Why?
Well, I think we didn't have more rigor because for a period of time, you want to take this?
But 5 years, he sure had a lot of rigor on that. And he's doing 7 years on one play.
When I usually write a play for that long, or some of my other plays, the reason why I go back to it is because I grow up. I grow up as a writer.
As a person, as a human being.
As a human being, and I want to go back and look at the voice that came out of that script and see whether does it still stand? Is it still the same? Can I look at it with a lens that's clearer with time? And it's always about that voice, the voice that comes from the script, and whether do the things that I believe in right now, are they still the same things as what I wrote back then? And if they are, why? And can I still excavate or peel back the layers so it becomes clearer?
On that note, I think the governments and the agencies, the powers that be, need to do to support Singapore writing is to lower the barriers for Singapore writing for both the producers and the audience.
What do you mean by this, lower the barriers?
I mean, in terms of giving resources so that a first-time writer doesn't find it like being lost in the woods, and also for audiences to help audiences be more receptive and more willing to come to these shows. So, Centre 42, I think, has been doing very good work, and they can continue to do that good work. Maybe it's just NAC telling existing theatre companies, hey, why don't explore giving writers more time and space to do this?
And that's exactly, I drove here telling myself I've got to write a little email, whether I like it or not, to all these, because you really have to have that.
Yeah.
And to me, thank you very much for being able to come here and talk. And I think that it was a good playwriting class, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it so?
It is. Yeah, we talked about playwriting. We did.
It's very rare that playwrights get asked properly what is playwriting, and actually having the chance to actually talk about it in detail.
There's such a lot more to playwriting than people think what playwriting is.
Playwriting is more than just the writing of it.
Yeah, I mean, like 70% of it is the rewriting.
Yeah.
I told you, Neil Simon his biography, rewriting. And it's not because the first writing was lousy, but the whole idea, is very organic. The whole idea is that it is a laboratory, it's a crucible, it's a whatever. And you just have to have that chance. And okay, so this is going to be, as we close for today, this is going to be the push that we will ask the people who look at our little segment and say that.